Give yourself a 10 out of 10 on everything except for one item.
Today, we are reacting to some viral TikTok videos. And this one starts with Be Your Own Cheerleader in Reviews. This is by Charlotte Chase. Chase? Charlotte, I'm sorry if I said your last name wrong. Okay. But she shares this controversial performance review hack that she credits with multiple raises and promotions in her tech career. Her advice is essentially year-end reviews can only do you harm unless you're really, really nice to yourself. In other words, when writing your self-evaluation or discussing your performance, don't be modest. Use that opportunity to hype up your accomplishments as much as possible. And she essentially implies that being self-critical or humble in your year-end review only gives your employer reasons to hold you back. So you should basically give yourself a glowing review to tip the scales in your favor. So we'll watch it fast and then I'll give you my 2 cents.
On that one item, where you're still an 8 out of 10, by the way, give an example showing that you recognize it as an opportunity and that you're improving. Companies make you do year-end reviews to help them decide who's going to get raises and promotions. The people who rate themselves high are the people who get raises and promotions. If you truly don't feel like you can give yourself a 10 out of 10 on something, then don't. But I recommend at least trying to convince yourself that you can. Who deserves that raise more, you or your CEO? Whose life will be more impacted by an extra 4K next year?
So she's not wrong, right? When she says the people who rate themselves highly are getting those raises and promotions, that's definitely accurate. Now, part of this you would like to believe is also because they are supporting that high score with high delivery, but it's not always the case. I also like what she says about if you're going to rate yourself lower, meaning an 8, make sure you're also talking about how you're improving in that area. You should never write a review where you just say, hey, this is an area where I suck or I'm working to improve. You should always be giving yourself, hey, this is how I'm growing. This is how I'm investing. This is how I'm developing in this space. Otherwise, ultimately, they're going to hold that against you because this is generally systemic. It's stored in an HR module somewhere. And we don't want your boss to later say, this is exactly why you didn't get promoted.
Budgets can be super complex depending on where you work, but you should at least put yourself in the running to be eligible for a raise or promotion. Don't sell yourself short by being too hard on yourself in your ratings. Most of us are not saving lives, we're just making our CEOs rich, so make sure you do what you need to do so that you get a fair share.
Something to double click here when she talks about the budget is most companies pool their funds for raises. Okay. So there's generally a separate budget to recruit new talent versus to promote existing talent. Those usually live in different, essentially, P&L lines. But the recruiting new talent, this is why people job hop, right? Because if you go somewhere else, you might make more money. They have a different budget for that versus internal promotions and raises can be more scarce. But she is right that generally we get a pool. Like my team gets a bucket of money that I then allocate to individuals based on their performance. And so your contract is kind of the baseline of how that raise and promotion and bonus will work, but it's definitely an allocation at your boss's discretion to an extent. And so budgets are super complex. Lots of companies do it different ways, but if you are looking to get a raise, you don't want to be giving yourself a 2 out of 5 in something when everybody else is rating themselves 4. Your boss isn't going to be able to defend that for a raise or a promotion. So there's a lot in here that I ultimately agree with, right? She's definitely hitting the nail on the head with some of the things that go on in corporate that we don't really talk about, right? How do you advocate for yourself? How do you use the system to get yourself a raise? People talk all the time about like, I left corporate because I got sick of making somebody else rich, which totally fair. And so she's touching on some things that are really helpful, but you want to make sure that your review matches that, right? It kind of touches on that nerve around office politics, self-advocacy. It's somewhat contentious. On one hand, you might say, like, of course you should promote yourself in evaluations. But on the other hand, you might feel like almost you're gaming the system or verging on dishonesty if you give yourself a 10 when you maybe don't feel you deserve it. So I think that this is kind of a issue right, issue wrong scenario, right? In my perspective, I generally agree with her. I do think that you should give yourself high ratings on most items. And if you are going to rate yourself lower, show how you're already improving in it. But you want to be honest as well, right? If you suck at something, I wouldn't give yourself a 10. It's going to be really hard to defend it. But you do need to toot your own horn, right? You can't just be like, hey, these are all the areas of improvement I have. We could all get better. But we want to make sure that we're also talking about how do we improve? How are we growing? What are we doing and delivering well? And also think of it compared to your peers. right? If you are a senior analyst and you think of the other senior analysts around you and you're killing it in comparison, you're not rating yourself on the same scale the CEO is rating themselves. You're rating yourself against the other senior analysts. So if you're the best senior analyst, be the best senior analyst, right? Talk about how great you are in your performance review. The overarching point of don't undersell yourself, it's valid, right? You absolutely should highlight your achievements during your performance reviews. However, you don't want to completely ignore your areas of growth, right? That can erode trust if your manager spots inconsistencies. You said you're 10 out of 10 in communication, and then meanwhile, communication is your biggest area of growth, right? You want to prepare a strong case for your contributions, have concrete results, data, rather than just downplaying yourself or wildly inflating your self-assessment on either extreme. Ultimately, get 360 feedback, use the review to discuss career development, not just self-congratulation, and be nice to yourself. In the end, your boss probably doesn't really know what you worked on in great extent anyways. So if you're going to be talking about the work that you did, if you're going to be talking about the projects, make sure you get credit for the work, make sure you get credit for the effort, and make sure that they realize that there are lots of areas you're performing well. And if you're working on opportunities, that you have a clear plan for how you're going to deliver that growth. So let me know, what did you guys think? Do you guys agree with Charlotte? And you're like, yes, you should definitely toot your own horn in your reviews. Or do you fall more on the other extreme of you want a more honest approach? Let me know in the comments.